listening. Find yourself. Find your voice. Find your problem. Wake up and sleep. Good evening, and welcome to the Eastman Institute for Oral Health virtual engagement event, and the third in our series. My name is Brian Winters, and I am the Director of Advancement and Alumni Relations for the Eastman Institute for Oral Health. I've worked at the University of Rochester Medical Center Alumni and Advancement Office for 10 years, and at Eastman since 2015. It is my pleasure to be facilitating this event and introducing our speakers. Tonight's format is slightly different from our previous events. It is a traditional style Zoom, so out of an abundance of respect to our presenters and attendees, please be sure to mute your connection now. Tonight's event is being recorded and will be posted on the EIOH YouTube page. Our previous two events, the Business of Teledentistry and the EIOH Town Hall with Dr. Eliev, are now posted and can be viewed on the EIOH YouTube page. This event is titled Education Reinvented, Keeping Residents Engaged Throughout the Pandemic and Beyond. Keeping us all connected in a casual platform that is both helpful and informative is an important reason we are providing these events. The goals of tonight are to share updates on how EIOH faculty and staff are designing and training online learning initiatives and educating residents during the challenging times of COVID-19. The examples and illustrations are considered best practices and have been presented nationally. Tonight's presentation is approximately 40 minutes and will be followed by 20 to 30 minutes of questions and answers. Please feel welcome to submit your questions throughout the presentation by using the Q&A box on this Zoom. They will be answered following the presentation. I also invite you to email me directly with additional questions after the session. My contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. With that, again, please allow me to ask you to turn your computers to mute and allow me to give some brief introductory remarks. Dr. Cynthia Wong is the Residency Program Director in Pediatric Dentistry here at Eastman. She's a 2008 dental school graduate from the University of Montreal. In 2009, Dr. Wong completed the general practice residency from the Montreal Children's Hospital program at McGill University. From 2009 to 2011, Dr. Wong was a faculty instructor at McGill University while working in pediatric private practice. In 2011, Dr. Wong moved to Rochester and 2 years later completed the pediatric dental residency program at EIOH. In 2015, she completed her Master's of Science at EIOH, and in 2018 was appointed Pediatric Residency Program Director. Dr. Wong was born in Australia, raised in Hong Kong and Canada, and now lives in Rochester with her husband. They are awaiting the arrival of their first baby this coming November. Dr. Aaron Shope hails from Allentown, Pennsylvania, and graduated summa cum laude from Colgate University with a bachelor's degree in biology. Dr. Shope studied dentistry at the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine and completed her residency in pediatric dentistry at Eastman in 2012. Dr. Shope has a master's degree in medical management from the University of Rochester and is currently completing a master's in health professions education here at the U of R. As the Director of Interdisciplinary Care in Pediatric Dentistry at EIOH, Dr. Shope is involved in providing high-quality, team-based care to children with craniofacial differences through the Golisano Children's Hospital's Cleft and Craniofacial Center. As the recipient of numerous national awards, Dr. Shope has a strong interest in creating a psychologically safe environment for active, rigorous learning during residency training. Her vision is to use innovative teaching and learning methods to create empathetic and critically thinking pediatric dentists that embrace change and become advocates for the whole child in the communities they serve. Our final presenter, Dr. Ritu Shah, is an assistant professor of clinical dentistry in the pediatric dentistry department here at Eastman. She also serves as the assistant residency program director. Dr. Shah completed her undergraduate dental school at the University of Pennsylvania in 2010. From there, she completed her pediatric dentistry residency at Eastman in 2012. As an upstate New York native, she was happy to join our faculty soon after graduating. Dr. Shah has a private practice in a suburb of Rochester. In addition, Dr. Shah enjoys her role as a faculty advisor to the Pre-Dental Student Club at the University of Rochester.
Thanks for Aaron.
She's currently obtaining her master's in health professions education through the Warner School of Education at the University of Rochester. She feels strongly that a multidimensional education and training is instrumental when integrating pediatric dentistry and resident education, both of which are her two passions. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Wong.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for the introduction. We also want to take a moment to thank our leadership at Eastman for all the help and support in developing the curriculum we're going to talk about today. It's great to see so many familiar faces and names on this Zoom call, so thank you all for being here. Tonight, we're going to talk about how we were able to use the pandemic as an opportunity to implement innovative changes in the pediatric dentistry residency program's curriculum. During this talk, we'll focus on some of the key skills and tools that we use to help us think innovatively to design and implement a purposely designed active learning experience for our residents during a time of great uncertainty. These skills and tools applications are not limited to an online or times of crisis, but should be used in many facets of education. Throughout the pandemic, our primary focus was not just to educate and meet requirements, but to create a psychologically safe and supportive learning environment for our residents during this extremely stressful time. We strove to achieve our vision of using innovative teaching and learning to create empathetic and critically thinking pediatric dentists who embrace change and become advocates for the whole child in the communities they serve. This vision did not change with the pandemic. Rather, we saw the pandemic as our opportunity to make great changes to better achieve our vision.
As you all know, across the country and the world, we were thrown into this teaching online thing in March. With the move to social distancing, many educational programs just had enough time to move what they were doing in person to online. This is called teaching online during disruption. It makes the best of the resources and the time available, but it can lack purposeful design. Online learning has had its associated stigmas. With the pandemic forcing us and everyone to embrace it, we were able to move past the stigmas and even start to address them. The reality is, like teaching in the traditional setting, online learning can be effective if done purposefully. The U.S. Department of Education completed this meta-analysis that found that the combination of elements of online and traditional learning, in other words, the hybrid format, had the biggest learning advantages. Fortunately, all three of us had been taking courses through the Warner School of Education since last year, so the online curriculum we were able to implement was much more purposeful than others. Our residents didn't sit on Zoom for hours each day. Rather, a combination of curriculum design and curation allowed for more effective use of time. In just 1 week, we were able to create and implement a purposeful online learning experience for our residents using relatively simple educational skills and concepts.
Faculty development opportunities, such as this one with the Warner School of Education, are one of the multiple examples of Melior in action. It's a collaboration that has allowed us to improve the quality of the education we provide to our residents. For years prior to the pandemic, we had been feeling that our curriculum, while extensive and thorough, was almost getting too big to handle. In our program, we highly value clinical experience with direct patient care for hands-on learning, and we were feeling that the didactic portion of the curriculum was eating into our precious time. Our residency program has a very well-established didactic curriculum that until this year remained relatively unchanged. We taught with traditional lectures, case presentation, and literature reviews or journal clubs. We assume that if we cover the material, the resident will be able to understand and apply it just like it is. Just to give you an idea, the AAPD reference manual has tripled in pages over the last 10 years as dentistry and pediatrics specifically advanced in many fronts. We started realizing that we just did not have enough time to cover all the material we wanted to.
For this reason, last year we decided to revisit our curriculum. We realized that most of our educational activities fell into one of two categories. First, covering content, and second, learning activities that are fun. Wiggins and McTee, the founders of Backward Design, named these downfalls the twin sins. For example, a traditional lecture can cover a lot of material, but this doesn't mean that the students have synthesized that information and can actually apply it to real practice. As we tinkered with our curriculum, we periodically surveyed our residents for feedback. As you can see from this quote, residents want to be engaged. This graph depicts the forgetting curve, where only 20% of lecture material is remembered in the long term if there's no reinforcement. As educators and dentists, we know the importance of successful completion of board exams, but we also know the value of retention of knowledge and skills. If content is purely covered in a lecture format, we run the risk of having this really steep forgetting curve for the majority of learners. In order for everything to fit, we realized that we needed to shift focus from content and knowledge to skills and understanding. To do this, we as faculty, along with our residents, needed to shift to a tinkering mindset. John Seely Brown is a philosopher researcher who specializes in organizational studies, specifically considering technology. In this short clip, he highlights tinkering, something he believes this generation needs to succeed.
Probably the most important thing for kids growing up today is the love of embracing change. I mean, the catch for preparing students for the 21st century workforce is how do you get kids that have curiosity and a questioning disposition?
We took on this idea of tinkering, really our first educational tool, as educators. We have this curriculum in place for decades. How can we take the good and add more to it with the time constraints we have? A year ago, we started implementing changes in phases.
I can't believe that was a year ago. And then the pandemic hit and patient care came close to a standstill. It gave us more time to tinker with the curriculum, and this was a silver lining to all of this for us. We viewed the pandemic as an opportunity to completely revolutionize our curriculum. As a disruptive force, the pandemic helped people meet change head on since there really wasn't any other option. In the span of 1 week, using the skills and tools we learned at the Warner School, we put together a purposefully designed, engaging online curriculum, which you'll see snippets of in this presentation. As we implemented our online curriculum, we tinkered and constantly reassessed and sought resident feedback. We held one-on-one Zoom check-ins with our residents to obtain weekly feedback. And 1 month into the pandemic and the online curriculum, we administered a formal survey. We'll share some of the results and resident feedback throughout this talk. We believe this helped instill a culture of intellectual curiosity, embracing change, tinkering, and psychological safety.
The second key educational tool that we have used to develop our online learning curriculum was the backward design. The concept of backward Design begins by first identifying goals or desired results. Once goals are identified, then we move on to choosing the assessments that demonstrates achievement of the learning goals. Last, we develop learning activities that align with the goals and assessments, providing needed scaffolding to the learning experience. Aggregate design can be applied to a single seminar, an entire course, or even an entire residency program. We actually use it to develop a purposefully designed online learning experience for our residents during the pandemic and going forward.
As tempting as it is to begin with the material that needs to be covered or with the cool instructional activity, we had to remember that these are the twin sins. Instead, we looked at our desired learning outcomes or results first. By examining and determining our goals first, we thought very carefully about our vision for the program and how we could create a psychologically safe learning environment that engaged our residents during the pandemic. Only then did we determine what would be acceptable evidence of residents' learning, and lastly, we planned learning experiences to achieve our goals. We did this for each course, module, and topic area. We knew that it was not realistic to expect people to sit on Zoom for hours on end and find it meaningful.
Let's delve deeper into our goals for our residency program during and beyond the pandemic. Setting these goals helped us to direct all of our resident assessments and activities, making each activity intentional and meaningful for our residents. First, the pandemic presented a huge amount of stress on all of us. Suddenly, residents were isolated from their friends and family, their plans were turned upside down, and there was a lot of uncertainty going forward. Our primary goal during the pandemic was to establish psychological safety. To help create a psychologically safe learning environment, we held weekly one-on-one Zoom check-ins, and these served as both evidence and learning experiences of psychological safety for each resident. We also were completely transparent with our curriculum and learning goals, being sure to provide rationale for each learning experience. Along the same lines, we continuously sought resident feedback on the online learning curriculum by sending out periodic surveys. Listening carefully to the residents, we were sure to implement changes to the curriculum based on their feedback and their needs at the time. We wanted our residents to feel supported and that their learning needs were being met.
Even before the pandemic, we encountered a common frustration of too little face-to-face time. Our second major goal in redesigning our curriculum was to make our limited face-to-face time more valuable. To do this, we used two main tools. First, learning management system. We use Blackboard. I'm sure we all have seen Blackboard before and know that it can be used to store learning materials, but it can do so much more than this. Learning management system allows for an organized and centralized location for announcements, course material, and assessments. Links to other learning tools can be embedded into the learning management system. As resident noted, Blackboard allowed us to interact with the content at a higher level. One tool is Blackboard Journal. These reflective response shared only with faculty. We have been given specific prompts or left things open-ended by asking for reflections of their week. Blackboard discussions can be used to create shared discussion between residents. We have used this with specific prompts such as, what are your take-home points, or as a mean of peer assessment. For example, a resident posted a draft of their research protocol to the discussion board, and their thinking partners provided feedback through the board. Faculty are able to view all of this and assess students' work and feedback. Another tool is the Yellowdick discussion board. Yellowdick is an online site that creates a safe space for resident discussion.
So true. To make our limited face-to-face time more valuable, we chose to implement a second key tool, offloading content. Offloading content means that rather than spending your limited face-to-face time conveying content or lecturing, it's spent developing key skills, applying knowledge, and extending these into the practice of dentistry. It allows for employment of active learning techniques and higher order learning during face-to-face sessions. We recognize that being on Zoom can be taxing for learners. We were sure to limit Zoom sessions to a max of 75 to 90 minutes, and these sessions primarily involved active case-based discussions. Offloading content has been helpful in getting the most out of our time on Zoom. We found it most effective to offload the content as pre-work before the face-to-face session. In other words, flipping the classroom.
We also found that offloading content provided some much needed repetition. And our third goal in designing our online learning curriculum was to create an environment of active learning. This came from having observed our residents engage in passive learning with little engagement. By embedding learning within the context of its use, we were able to increase student engagement and active learning despite having to do virtual learning during the pandemic. To help achieve this goal, we use communities of learning as an educational tool. Many of us engage in online communities of learning such as Facebook groups and the AAPD Little Teeth Chat and others. Our aim was to create a similar safe and connected space for resident questions, engagement, and discussion. These are some of the digital tools that we have found helpful to create this community of learning with our residents. We have the WhatsApp group chat, which is a free app that we use to give residents updates, share uplifting videos and silly memes. And YellowDig functions as a great tool for asynchronous discussion, but on a deeper level, it also creates that community of learning where residents can give each other feedback on presentations or posts they've written. Whether on YellowDig, Blackboard, or Zoom, online learning and discussion, we found it critical to establish psychological safety within that environment. To do this, it helped to level the playing field between residents and instructors and have the instructors act as a guide instead of an all-knowing expert. We had the instructors lead discussions from a place of inquiry and advocacy.
Our fourth goal in redesigning our curriculum was to use innovative techniques to meet residency requirements. For instance, our second-year residents were each shy of about 10 sedation cases, which were required for their graduation. During the pandemic, we were not permitted to complete oral sedation cases in our clinic. We had to be creative in how to give them a valuable sedation learning experience. In collaboration with the University of Rochester Medical Center's Center for Experiential Learning, we designed an online sedation simulation module. By creating 10 varied case scenarios modeled off of actual cases, we were able to give resident exposure and experience with aspects of sedation that they, in many ways, will not come across during their residency. For example, not every resident experiences a rare adverse event such as anaphylaxis in a clinic. However, each resident was able to experience anaphylaxis management in this simulation. It's these rare events that they actually need repeated training to feel competent and confident. Thus, the simulation, while not being with real patients, provide a more valuable learning experience for our residents. This is an example of a simulation of an adverse event during sedation. The planning and execution of the sedation simulation module was entirely done through Zoom, as we have never met our collaborators at CEL in person. In this video, we are showing how a resident manages an aspiration of a tooth. Before we play this video, you will notice that this dialogue is between the instructor at CEL, who plays the role of a dental assistant, and the resident performing the sedation. The attending faculty is present for assessment of the resident. Notice how real this could get. After the simulation, we usually have a plan for an immediate debriefing sessions to complete the case and provide timely feedback.
Hold her head still for you, but oh geez, I'm losing control of her head.
I got it. I'm gonna do a head lock for her.
Okay, but where did the tooth go?
Where is her tooth? Can we?
Where did her tooth is gone? Where did it go? I don't see it. What do you want me to do?
Hey, Kim, relax. I can handle this. Please calm down. We need to.
Okay.
Let me look in her mouth. There it is, in her throat. Give me the yank hour suction. I'm gonna take it out.
All right, here's the yank hour.
Thank you. Okay. Here we go. Tooth is out. Let me make sure her airway is patent so she can breathe okay.
Luckily, our second years are have all successfully completed the online sedation cases and met all quota requirements for graduation. They have not only met the minimal requirement, but they also gain meaningful experience beyond what cases in our clinic were previously able to provide.
Online teaching has quickly become our new norm here at Eastman, and we're continuing to tinker with our online learning curriculum. However, in July, with the new academic year, the pandemic brought to light a whole new set of challenges. How could we orient our new residents during this very isolated time? We found that many of our incoming residents had not touched a patient in 4 to 5 months. Also, our second years had missed key shadowing and observational experiences, especially regarding oral sedation cases, since we stopped doing sedations in our clinic in March. We realized that we needed to bring backward design and goal setting into our new academic year. The new academic year brought new goals for us. How can we make sure our new second year residents feel comfortable and confident in the theoretical knowledge they learned about treating patients with sedation? To orient the new second years to their new clinical responsibilities, we developed several purposeful online educational experiences. In particular, we realized from using the sedation simulation module with the previous class and from their feedback that the simulation could act as a stepping stone between didactics and actual patient care, thus enhancing psychological safety. Here's an example of a resident completing the asynchronous online simulation training for sedation.
Good morning, Dr. Shah. I want to review a case with you this morning of a 3-year, 4-month-old boy who is presenting here with mom and dad for sedation. The patient was previously uncooperative at their examination, hence sedation was suggested. The patient has an unremarkable medical history as per the HAP, which was reviewed last week. Cleared. There were a couple of details on the HMP which we had to clarify with Dr. Grace Black in regards to the patient's elevated blood pressure that was found and whether the patient has a history of snoring or sleep apnea, which was unreported on the HMP.
Another challenge we faced 3 months into the pandemic was how to welcome and orient a group of new residents. How could we create these communities of learning and psychological safety virtually with residents we didn't already know? We began by holding Zoom happy hours with the incoming residents in May. We also paired each incoming resident with a senior resident and had them call their little sibling to help ease them into the Eastman community. Prior to officially starting residency, we assigned each new resident pre-work as offloaded content with the intention of them getting to know the Rochester community as well as identifying their own goals for their time in residency. The focus of our first face-to-face session was getting to know each other, our residency teaching style, and the city of Rochester. Our outdoor, socially distant session began with a discussion circle and sharing of goals. Next, we completed a team building exercise and sent the residents on a scavenger hunt around the city of Rochester to become familiar with our community and the places our patients may talk about. In the past, we realized that our residents often fail to connect to the local community during their 2-year residency, and this often leads to a lack of understanding and identification of healthcare barriers. Therefore, this summer, we set up this goal of fostering engagement within the Rochester community. Our second orientation session, held over Zoom, included a more in-depth orientation in the community that we serve at Eastman and the injustices and disparities in healthcare our patients face. The residents were asked the key essential question of how can you fight injustices in care as a resident at Eastman? From this question, they developed key initiatives independently, including the formulation of partnerships with community organizations. This module has grown into a 2-year-long advocacy and ethics program, and our hope is that wherever our residents end up, they will remain active and engaged as advocates for children in their community.
The pandemic has forever changed how we approach education. Even if restrictions are lifted in the future, we will continue to use these learning and teaching experience from the pandemic to continue to improve and provide quality resident education. The pandemic helped us not to only become complacent of what we used to be doing. The pandemic, going back to John Seeley Brown, provided us the opportunity to tinker with our curriculum, teaching philosophy and style using an online format supported with face-to-face sessions. This opportunity has been incredibly valuable as we have been able to implement what we have learned to readily improve each of our ongoing courses. For example, this summer, we converted our Introduction to Pediatric Dentistry course to a hybrid format. We use similar course design, online learning tools, simulation, and active learning techniques to optimize our limited face-to-face time for didactic education. We already see evidence of deeper learning in our new first-year residents. Just 2 months into our program and 3 weeks into clinical care, the immersive didactic curriculum was effective in transitioning our new residents back to clinical care after almost 6 months without touching a handpiece. Because of the success of these initiatives to better orient our resident and provide psychologically safe and active learning experience, we plan to continue these initiatives with future classes, tinker with them along the way to provide an educational experience that meets our residents' current needs.
We want to loop back to John Seeley Brown, as he says it best in this video.
What's the way that these systems really work, and how do I kind of learn that by experimenting with the stuff myself? Because you kind of learn that not everything works. In fact, most things don't work. And if the first thing that happens when something doesn't work is it frightens you, then you're not going to be very willing to embrace change. But if you realize that when things don't work, which is almost always, you can get in there and figure out how to tinker with these things and just absorb what happens. Very often when you're tinkering, it doesn't make pure logic sense. It's something you begin to feel in your hands as much as your mind. Tinkering brings thought and action together in some very powerful, magical ways.
Being open to change and allowing for time for tinkering has been critical during the pandemic and will continue to be for the time ahead of us. So much is still unknown. Tinkering and being open to change will help us as educators and dentists adapt to these changing circumstances. Additionally, it will help demonstrate to our residents the importance of this open mindset throughout their careers. This embraces the motto of the University of Rochester, Meliora, ever better. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to write in the chat box. We'd like to take this opportunity also to thank our incredibly engaging, flexible, and open-minded pediatric dentistry residents at the University of Rochester. Thank you. If you have any lingering questions, you can also feel free to email us. And follow us on Instagram too.
I will ask a question. Maybe you can add something about the module you developed for treatment for patients with intellectual and developmental disability. It's the same, something that's related and you didn't mention. So.
Cynthia, do you want to talk about your online module, your grant?
Yeah. It's going to be finalized very soon. It is a grant that we received for the department in collaboration with the Complex Care Center, the MCC, and the Special Olympics. It is an online module that is going to go live very soon in the next 2-3 weeks. This basically, our principle was, we find that there's actually a disparity in terms of the education standard across the country in healthcare provider training for patients, for treating patients with IDD. So what we have done with the collaboration of these entities and with Aaron being part of it, we made an online module that is accessible for everyone everywhere in the world to learn to feel more comfortable treating patients with IDD. And we give tools and activities so that they could actually become more competent and comfortable. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and we had a question about sharing how Eastman is doing in this space compared to peer institutions. So I think we're real leaders in this. In terms of online education, the University of Rochester and the Warner School of Education have themselves been leaders in online learning. And we've been really lucky to have Warner as a resource for all of our Eastman faculty to gain skills and knowledge in online education. For that reason, I know in pediatric dentistry, I know what other programs did during the pandemic, and it came nowhere close to what we were doing. I know a lot of programs simply took what they were doing in person and just put it on Zoom, and residents were sitting on Zoom for hours on end. We valued our residents' time and wanted to have those face-to-face sessions to be really valuable active learning experiences, and found that if we really needed a lecture, we could record that and they could watch it in their own time. The pandemic is like a time of such great stress, and we really, really valued creating a very psychologically safe environment. I know we said that multiple times in our talk, and we felt that giving them some flexibility was really important during this very stressful time. So,
and talking about what other peer institutions are doing, basically we gave a very similar lecture through the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry earlier in May as one of the keynotes for the academic day. Basically, after that, there are so many good inputs in reforming education during the pandemic that it led major changes in residency program across the country. So we helped build up a network of programs where we are sharing our lectures through the country right now. So it's a great initiative that, that we have started tinkering, and we're very glad that it was brought nationwide.
I just wanted to chime in. I see Dr. Clemens' comments in the chat box and totally agree. It's really changed the way that we approach how we plan lectures, how we plan courses. And I think just having the idea that we want to make everything we have the residents do be meaningful has really shifted and actually made it much more enjoyable even as faculty for us too.
It's almost addicting when you start tinkering and making changes and seeing how residents light up and enjoy and value those educational experiences. I think it's made us better instructors and better faculty, and you can feel the value that the residents perceive as well. So it's really cool. And once you start doing that, it's like you can't stop. I can't go back to how I taught 2 years ago now. I just can't do that. So. Mm-hmm.
And we truly believe that every resident comes through our program is going to bring us, learning experience to us as well as a faculty. Because after a few years of being a faculty, we feel like the residents are coming to ask us for our expertise. But we keep reminding them that we are not necessarily the expert, we're just your coach. So please teach us what you know from before so that we can make this better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we did kind of shift. I think in traditional educational environments, the instructor or the faculty is seen as like this all-knowing expert. But we really valued leveling the playing field a bit. We still, I think, are experts, but creating that safe environment where you're seen more on a level playing field, it makes you more approachable as faculty. And we find our residents are very open with talking to us about their questions and concerns. And we see so much more and can assess where they are in terms of their learning when we have that really open engagement with them and active discussion. We honestly, throughout this whole process, haven't given a single exam. And I feel like I know where each and every resident is. way better than before. So that's just through discussion, whether it's face-to-face and live or written discussion boards or reflections.
The other thing we started realizing is that, as the years progress, these residents are coming in having had a different education in high school, undergrad, even dental schools shifting to these newer models. And I think we just have to maintain that so that when they do arrive in residency, we can ease that transition a little bit better too.
Thank you, doctors. If there's any other questions, now would be the time to feel free to chime into the chat box. While we still have, looks like we can wrap up a little bit early. If there's, I'll give everybody one last minute to offer a question before we have closing remarks. Okay, thank you, doctors. This concludes our event. We will reach out to everyone as best we can with follow-up. And on behalf of Doctors Wong, Shope, Shaw, and myself, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, please feel welcome to email me directly. You see my email address there with any additional questions you might have. And please be on the lookout for future EIOH virtual engagement series events and ways to stay connected through the Melior Collective, our exclusive online university network to make meaningful, professional, and personal connections. Thank you.
Thank you.